Fire Emblems was a series I started playing in 2020, right here on this channel. I streamed my way through Fates and instantly fell in love with the series. Since then, it's been a topic of a variety of videos, be it stream highlights of Fates, a look at Three Houses characters, or, that game. At least the video's pretty good. This is a series that I get endless enjoyment from. So now, imagine how hyped I was when I saw a trailer for a brand spanking new game. Engage was the first time I actually got to see the release of a game, and watch how opinions, thoughts, builds, and theories grew from its debut. It was actually released one day off of my birthday. It's like this game and I were destined for each other. It's been over 2 years now since Engage came out. Since then, I played through the game twice, plus one new one for this playthrough. I've seen a few videos discussing the game, been on some threads about the quality of the whole package, and, most importantly, taken in enough of the game to form my own solid opinions on it. This game is utterly ridiculous, I tell ya. Like most Fire Emblem games, it's got its ups and downs. Some things it does better than others, and some worse. But I don't think I've ever seen them as extreme as this. As many have done previously, I want to break down the various elements of Fire Emblem Engage and see what makes them tick. To do so, I've broken the game into 6 major sections, with various subsections within. I'll go through all these from best to worst, and timestamps for all of them can be found in the description. Oh yeah, and major spoilers ahead. This game is a mixing pot of all the best and worst the series has to offer, which combine to make one thing about the game clear. Engage is the worst, best Fire Emblem game. If there's one thing Fire Emblem always nails, it's music. Every single game in the series has been full of non-stop bangers, no exceptions. I recently played FE1, and you'd better believe I was jamming out to that soundtrack. Engage is no exception to this. I was grooving to it when I was playing the game, while I was working on this video, and it'll be a large majority of the soundtrack for this video. Now, I know best in this series is a tall claim considering the immense competition, but Engage really has it all. It keeps that dynamic battle music of the modern games, which I personally much prefer to the cut-in songs of old. The cutscene music really fits with the tone of whatever event is occurring. And the ambient tracks of the world map and hub are nice and atmospheric. And don't even get me started on battle prep. Prep songs are always some of my favorites, but this time just, oh man! Now, every game since Awakening has also had a main theme that gets remixed multiple times throughout, and Engage is cool enough to double dip on this trope. The titular theme is playing whatever the emblem rings are involved. The song only consists of a single harp, with different variations of the song adding a few background instruments. It's a great track. It feels mystical, and even though the tempo gets slid around every which way throughout the game, it always manages to work and sound great. The song does a lot with a little, and is one of the best tracks throughout, especially the ring chamber version. But that's not the real main theme, oh no. Somber and quiet songs are nice and all, but how about something loud, bombastic, and yeah, there we go. Emblem Engage is a very creatively named main theme for the game, and so it reflects the game as a whole. Like the ring theme, it has a ton of variations that play throughout the game, with my personal favorite being this distraught battle theme. All of the variations, and all of the different instrumentations, tempos, tones, and times when they played, all managed to sound absolutely amazing. The song has a brilliant melody, and it is super catchy. You'll be humming it to yourself for a while after playing the game. Or even better, you could be singing it to yourself. That's right, they gave this song lyrics, which the game will remind you about every time you boot it up. The opening cutscene is essentially a music video for the song, and boy, this song. The lyrics contain descriptions of all the main characters, and parts of the summons for all the rings. The whole thing is so unapologetically cheesy. I've seen it compared to a 4Kids dub of an anime, and that could not be more accurate. It fits the song so well though, and like I said, it represents the game phenomenally. Amazing melody, fantastic instrumentation, and the corniest Saturday morning cartoon lyrics on top of it all. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Now that we've gone through the appetizers, we can get to the first entree of this video. Engage's gameplay is sort of a combination of ideas from across series, cherry picking the best aspects to make it as smooth as possible, infinite weapon durability of Gaiden, constitution and con growth from Thracia, dodge taking being as viable as in the GBA games, support system of Awakening, backup attacks working similarly to Fate's pair-up, and, most importantly, the customizability of 3 houses. Despite taking so many ideas from across the series though, Engage manages to have its own identity and distinct playstyle. For starters, Engage does away with any form of unit stacking. No pair-up, no adjutants, nothing like that. I think this is done to simplify things a bit, as Engage is a very beginner-friendly game. But the idea is still there. Engage offers 3 new mechanics, the first of which is a class-specific ability called backup attacks. Engage divides classes into various categories, and gives each one a unique ability, unless it's built for mobility. Mages ignore terrain bonuses, coverts double terrain bonuses, dragons get stronger engages, etc. The standard infantry classes of old, Swordmaster, Warrior, Soldier, and the like, get grouped into a new category called backup. When you initiate combat against a foe who's in attack range of a backup unit, they'll attempt a backup attack. These always have 80 hit and deal 1/10 of the target's health, and the brilliance of this mechanic cannot be overstated. For starters, the chip damage is supremely useful. These hit rates are unchanged by terrain, and damage is unaffected by defense. Because of this, it's not only viable, but actually really damn helpful to go for backup chip damage to finish off a foe, especially if the attacker is someone who normally struggles to kill. This leads nicely into the great positioning this encourages. Since backup units can only attack foes in the range of their equipped weapons, you have to put some forethought into exactly where you want to place them. You want them to be at a spot where they can get as much backup damage as possible, but you probably don't want them surrounded with so many enemies they get wiped on enemy phase. And they need to be in spots where teammates can actually follow up on their position. Backup attacks do stack, so with bosses especially, you can get some really valuable damage by just surrounding enemies in advance. It's an ingenious mechanic that adds an extra layer of strategy to the gameplay, and I really hope it comes back in later games. On the flip side, how about a mechanic that's been around in previous games, but has a new twist? The weapon triangle is a fundamental part of Fire Emblem, dating all the way back to the 4th game. Swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat sword. A fundamental idea that's been drilled into the head of everyone who touched the series. It's been reworked and modified several times throughout its history. It was 2 strong, then barely noticeable, then 3 triangles 1, then recombined into 1 triangle, and then gone. It's had varying effects throughout the games, but in almost every iteration, it'll increase hit rate and might when at advantage. Emphasis on the almost, because Engage entirely does away with that. Yeah, Engage decided to completely rework one of the core features of the series, and you know what? It did a great job. If a unit initiates combat against the foe they have advantage against, and land a hit on them, that unit will be broken for the next round of combat that phase. A broken unit cannot counterattack for 1 round, letting anybody else get a free hit in. Break feels like it really should be on the box next to the Engage mechanic, since it defines the gameplay of Engage just as much. A broken opponent is effectively neutralized for 1 turn, letting you weaken them with a unit who couldn't survive a counterattack, feed a kill to a training project, or just work on finishing them off if they're a tough boss or enemy. To go along with this mechanic, they've expanded the weapon triangle a bit. Bows, tomes, and knives will all be broken by arts, a brave weapon returning from 3 houses and exclusive to clerics and other support classes. This change is great, since it gives the classes more stuff to do on the battlefield while keeping their original support role, and adds an interesting counter to ranged attacks. Now if the Tellius magic weapon triangle were here, everything would be perfect. On the subject of staff bots though, they've got more tricks up their sleeve. All who can use arts now have access to the new chain guard feature. If the wielder is at full health, they use their turn to ready a parry, and the first time an adjacent unit gets hit by an attack, they'll jump in to negate all damage and effects, but at the cost of 10% of the guard's health. It's a phenomenal mechanic that lets you bait out powerful enemies, or land a killing blow at the training project with good positioning, or escape out of a bad situation more safely, or more. They really went all out with staff units in this game, and it's great. They feel like they always have a wide selection of things to do with their turn to help out the team. It's a vast improvement over the old days of healing 1 health for staff XP, and I couldn't be happier with it. On that note, classes have gone through some major overhauls that better support the gameplay Engage encourages, since it's all built around reclassing. Any unit can reclass into any other class or promote into basically any tier 2 class at 10th level. The one requirement is that they have to have proficiency with the weapon the class uses. which is the first major change: weapon ranks. In every other game, weapon rank is a stat that increases as you use the weapon type. Use them enough and you'll learn how to use better weapons. Simple as. In Engage, your weapon rank is a flat stat that's granted by the class the unit's in. The only way to increase it further is by keeping a unit using a weapon they started out using, since most of them are extra proficient with their base class's weapon, granting them one higher rank. This is a rework that I can see people disliking, but I love it. There was a certain satisfaction in seeing your units gradually get stronger and gaining access to more powerful weapons. It really made them feel like they were training and becoming better fighters. But as nice as that is, it cannot make up for all the times I reclassed some of the 3DS games and they had to use stupid ass bronze weapons for 4 maps straight. Engage is a game that encourages reclassing more than ever. It's a fundamental design of the game. If they wanted to make reclassing more fun, they had to do something about weapon rank, and this is a great solution. Classes themselves have gone through some changes as well. For starters, movement has been lowered across the board. Infantry classes and armors have 4 move, and promoted mounts only have 6. This is a universal change to accommodate for smaller maps, I believe, but also closes the power gap between footlocked and mounts a bit. It's nice. The game might have the biggest selection of classes ever, with more weapon combinations possible than any game before it. Soldier, Halberdier, Griffin Knight, Great Knight, and a bunch of other crazy classes returned from previous games, with new additions like the Staff and Lance wielding Royal Knight, or the Sword and Knife based Wolf Knight. Some classes got some rebalanced weapon options as well. Generals and Paladins are forced to pick one of swords, lances, or axes, which really hurts Paladins especially. In fact, no class has control over the entire weapon triangle. A few of them, like Great Knight and Wyvern, get 2 options from it, but they never get the whole thing on their own. It's a pretty nice way of balancing classes around the improved triangle. Hero nobly gets to choose either axes or lances, which I love. Hero's always been one of my favorite classes, and anything to make them better is a great change in my book. Another weird balancing that comes with the single weapon promotes: Sniper, Swordmaster, Berserker, and Halberdier. They're the only ones to use the S rank weapons, but in exchange they lose out on all the crit bonuses the classes are known for. This one ain't worth it at all. The S rank weapons are good and all, but man, crit was the only selling point in most of these classes, and you can really see why if you try using one of them here. They blow. The last major change to classes comes from the skill system. I swear they change this thing every game. It's possible for units to inherit skills, but only from emblems. Pro classes get 1 skill at 5th, and that's it. You can't carry it across classes, so there's a heavy amount of value put on this one skill. There's a ton of diversity here. Very few of the skills feel at all similar, but it's also pretty clear that not all class skills are created equal. For example, let's look at the cream of the crop. Heroes get the ability to do 2 backup attacks. That's a free 20% HP, nice. Warriors infamously get an extra 50% damage on broken foes, which skyrockets them up to being the best class in the game. That and longbow backups. Wolf Knights inflict -2 move on enemies they hit, which can be devastating with a universally lowered movement. Halberdiers get a guaranteed double if they're sandwiching an enemy, which is really impractical, but can make some super funny Brave Lance builds. Finally, Thieves can't unlock anymore, but they get past, so it's all good. That's only a fraction of the great skills. There's a ton of fantastic ones that further enhance solid classes. On the flip side, Swordmasters get the ability to run through an enemy, which is situational at best. Berserkers can knock foes back 2 spaces with smash attacks, which is a mechanic I haven't mentioned because they're mostly useless. And poor Paladins got stuck with Pivot. They really hated Paladins, huh? Move nerf, bad skill, 1 weapon type. I'd be mad, but considering Paladins have been the best class since the first game, it's about time they got served a slice of humble pie. I think you get the idea by now. Engage's design of the classes is let the player have the freedom to customize their team as much as they want. Aside from 3 houses, it is the game with the most customizability in the series. It wants you to try things out. I'm a sucker for games with lots of options, so it's no wonder I've been heaping so much praise on the system. But even the best gameplay mechanics mean nothing if the maps you use them on aren't fun. Hey, what's that doing here? Engage has 26 maps, excluding the meaningless prologue, and a large chunk of them are really well designed. The devs are fully aware of all the tools the player can use, and are more than willing to play around with them or use the same tools against you. Engage enemies are more than willing to use actual strategies against your team, often featuring several chain guards. It's a great give and take. Engage gives you the ability to craft some insane unit builds, and then throws a bunch of unique combat scenarios at you that force you to use your whole team to surmount. As for the maps themselves, oh boy, I really could talk about them all in depth and what makes them work, but we'd be here for hours. Maybe I'll do that at some point, but I'll just look at one map to get a point across. Chapter 14, The Battle for Solm. This map is really interesting to play because of how many things you need to do at once. There are a whopping 4 bosses on this map, but all of them hang out in the top room and will only come out when you enter their range, so you don't have to worry about them right away. Instead, you need to deal with the paladins and knights on either side of your team, archers and mages pelting you down from the upper ground, a bunch of flyers who will spawn behind your team after a few turns, and thieves trying to take treasures from the chests in the corner of the map, one of which contains boots. Oh, and not to mention, your team's gonna have to split in 2. It sounds like an unwinnable situation, and in any other game it might be, but Engage throws this at you because it knows you have the tools to fight back. It's a challenging but fair puzzle to tackle, and is immensely satisfying to solve using all your team members in Emblem rings. Even the top room with 4 bosses who rush you at once isn't unreasonable. They're all pretty threatening and can easily take out any of your units on their own. But if you play smart and use the tools the game gives you, you can take them down without any major issues. It's a phenomenal map. It represents everything that makes Engage's map design great. I didn't know where else to fit this in, but I want to talk about engravings real fast. Engravings are bonuses you can put onto weapons alongside standard forging. Every Emblem ring you acquire unlocks a new one, and they typically reflect some aspect of the character that unlocks them. There are 2 really interesting things about engravings though. Firstly, most of them aren't all positive. A few of them are just minor increases all around, but a bulk of them will increase some stats on weapon in exchange for decreasing others. A good example of this is the Sacred engraving. It grants an extra 40 hit and 20 crit, but in exchange for taking away 20 avoid and dodge. Or the Binding engraving, bestowing a whopping 3 might, but taking away 30 avoid and adding 8 weight. There's a lot of decision making that goes into engraving. You gotta consider what a character wants and then how much they want that buff. It's even more of a complex decision than you might think, because only one weapon can hold any engraving at a time. If you try putting the Holy engraving on a weapon when a different one already has it, it'll just move the engraving over to the new weapon. In combination with the return of infinite weapon durability, engravings let you superpower a weapon that could carry you through most of the game, but typically at a large trade-off. It's a super fun mechanic that adds another layer of customization onto an already super customizable game. Not every engraving is equal though. I don't know what they were thinking with Ike's. 3 might is great, don't get me wrong, but in exchange for 15 weight, that's nuts! Nobody's gonna be able to lug that thing around, even with con growth returning. But hey, it did lead to what is undoubtedly my favorite screenshot of this game. A picture truly is worth 1,000 words. And finally, it's time we talked about the namesake mechanic, Emblem rings. As you progress through the game, your team will acquire various rings holding the spirits of past Fire Emblem lords, and will offer some unique benefits to whomever wears the ring. Each ring is entirely unique from each other, offering a completely different set of skills and bonuses, and like everything else in the game, they offer a ton of options. All the rings have a few basic traits shared between them. They give some general stat buffs, and a massive boost to one stat through skills that can be inherited. They also have some specialized skills that can be inherited, boosting units' performance without needing to wear the ring. Finally, while engaged, a ring offers 3 personal weapons, an extremely strong skill that further enhances the emblem's role, and a once per engage attack, a powerful move designed to turn the tides of battle. While that explanation may make them sound similar, they all have completely different skills and stats. They can all specialize in a unique role. It really doesn't feel like there's any overlap between them. For some examples, Marth gives a bunch of avoid and speed, and a mini follow-up if unit triggers break, and then a second mini follow-up no matter what if engaged. He's built around being a menace on player face who can whittle down enemies with a series of attacks without having to worry about being hit in return. This is further exemplified by his engage attack, a 7 to 9 hit combo of small sword swipes. On the flip side, Leaf is a super unique enemy phase buffer who will automatically switch weapons to have the upper hand in combat, and will then decrease damage received if the unit has triangle advantage. He definitely requires the right units and proper planning, but he can shine in the right situations. Meanwhile, Micaiah is a support emblem who buffs the hell out of staves. Anyone wearing the ring can use staves, and when they do, they heal much more, hit more often, and when engaged can affect up to 4 more people with each staff. Movement staves especially just go off the rails with Micaiah. Being able to warp up to 5 units at once is crazy, especially when paired with Violet's ability to dance 4 people at once. Every single emblem opens the door to a new playstyle, and all of them are really well thought out to enable that playstyle. Pairing them with the right unit can not only enhance what a character does, but easily fix critical issues that they have. Lyn is easily the best example of this. Lyn gives speed. Lots of speed. Base speed stats, speed taker, altricity. She's a ring built around helping the unit go fast. So, there are 3 types to put her on. Firstly, a unit who's already really fast. Speed is a good stat to have a few extra points in, especially since it helps with avoid. So throwing her on a sniper or swordmaster helps them survive, and can counteract the weight of heavier weapons like an engraved brave bow. Secondly, coverts. The aforementioned avoid boost on units who already stack tons of avoid is nice, obviously, but coverts using Glint also get access to the legendary 20 range Astra Storm, which can provoke bosses from pretty much anywhere on the map. An excellent choice for making the game itself go faster, though not my preferred playstyle. Thirdly, and most interestingly, fixing a unit's speed. If a character is starting to double less or even get doubled, letting them wear Lynn's Ring easily fixes that up. While this can be used to help slightly slower units like Diamant or Amber stay ahead of the tight doubling thresholds, it can also be used to make Louis, the Armor Knight of the game, into a Swordmaster. I think this perfectly leads into my final point about Engage's gameplay. Any unit in Engage can reclass basically at will, equip 2 skills from any emblem, get engraved weapons that alter stats in several directions, and equip any of the 19 different rings and use their benefits in dozens of ways. Engage is a game that wants you to mess around, experiment, and have fun doing so, and it gives you all the tools you need to do that successfully. It wants you to find all the crazy strong or hilariously gimmicky combinations that you can, and use them to their fullest extent. Fire Emblem games have always been built with replayability in mind, and the more options you have to toy around with, the more fun they'll be on repeat playthroughs. Engage provides all these options, but also a fantastically designed game to use them in. Great mechanics, awesome maps, tons of optional content. It's this that elevates it above games like Three Houses and Awakening for me. They have the options, sure, but there is a good reason that Engage is the Fire Emblem game I've played through the most, despite being out for the least amount of time. I love games that encourage you to goof around, and I love games that reward you for said goofing around, and Engage is perfect for that. But now that we've gone over the tools to make great units, I want to take a moment to show off the units I've made with the tools. This was my third playthrough of Engage, so I got really experimental with some combinations, and I love how they turned out. start off this segment, I love that Engage is a game that encourages and rewards teamwork. Every unit you deploy in a chapter will be able to carry their weight more so than any other game. With all the new features I just spent 20 minutes raving about, each individual unit has a ton of ways to use their action, and using them all with each other for a common goal is unbelievably satisfying. The last quarter or so of maps require you to use every tool to succeed, turning them into some really interesting puzzles to solve. The penultimate map is a great example of this. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place for the entirety of the map. There's infinite reinforcements chasing your rear, and beefy enemies with scary stat saves in front of you. It becomes a serious challenge to hold ground for long enough to get into a good attack formation, and any ground you gain feels like a tremendous victory. I decided to warp skip the last section, but just getting that set up took a good amount of effort. I still deal with Lumera after that, and she's no pushover. She's got 2 range, is immune to affected damage, has 3 health bars, and is on an avoid heal tile. I had to use many different units in tandem to take her down. A good combination of backup from her infantry units, debuffs from Corrin, Celica's engage skill, and a myriad of buffs from inherited skills. It took all of my units working together to make it through this chapter, and it forced me to use every tool Engage gave me, but it was immensely satisfying to figure out. Moments like this are what makes me love Engage so dearly, despite the numerous flaws we'll get to. However rotten the rest of the package may be, the core gameplay is the best the series has ever seen, and I'll stand by that. With Break, Chi Adept class types, Emblem rings, the skill overhaul, the boss rework, and the extremely tight balance of the game, Engage is, and will likely remain, my absolute favorite Fire Emblem game to play. Like several games before it, Engage lets you have a little breather between fights by letting you rest and explore Hub World. This time, the hub is a floating fortress called the Somniel. It's substantially smaller than the monastery from 3 Houses, thank god, but has a fair share of things to do. You've got your standard collection of shops, some ways to build support, extra ways to enhance rings, all the standard stuff. But like everything in this game, there's also a bunch of other weird things, some better than others. Let's look at the arena first. The arena changes in every game these days, but this is definitely one of my favorite renditions of it. In this arena, you select a unit and they will duel against a randomly chosen unit from your army. If they win, they get some XP and you can do the process thrice between battles. Getting to fight your allies is what makes the arena in Engage. With the slow reveals in the intro line each character gets, it's weirdly hype seeing who your selected contenders gonna go up against. They can be put at a ridiculous disadvantage by going against a trained unit designed to counter their class, or they can get an untrained scrub from the start of the game who gets one shot. The gambling aspect of the arena is still there, even if the penalty isn't death anymore. Most notably though, the arena is just really fun to watch. It's awesome to see 2 characters you invested time and effort into go toe to toe. I'm pretty sure that at least half my save videos of this game are just of the arena, but with good reason. Sometimes it's an edge of your seat duel between your 2 biggest training projects, and other times it's stuff like this.
I am Zelkov, retainer to Princess Ivy. Say your goodbyes! Had this been a battlefield, I would be slain.
God, I love this game. Second fiddle too, but right outside of the arena is the kitchen. Every time you stop by, one randomly chosen character will offer to cook you a meal. You can choose what meal and who eats with you, like 3 Houses, but not how well it turns out. This is determined by who cooks it and some RNG, and there's a huge variety of quality. I think it ranges from double S to G, with stats mostly following accordingly. I'm not dedicating this chunk of time to talk about the kitchen because I think it's an essential part of the game, but rather because I think it's a fun distraction that's the source of a bulk of my screenshots in this game. It's super funny to have a great plan to buff the right stats for your next battle, only for Amber to completely botch it and end up reducing almost every stat instead. Big fan. You can also spend some time in the Somniel forging your bond with Sami, the island's guardian. It's really slow, but he's cute, so I don't mind. I have nothing more to say on this, so let's get back to the interesting stuff. Every crown royal that you recruit has a unique mini-game that you can play with them to earn some rewards. This can mean temporary stat boosts, money, forge items, things like that. The mini-games themselves, though, I mean, they're fun. Sometimes. Some of them. The first one you unlock is strength training, a strange minigame that consists of pushing buttons in time. It's an alright one. Nice buffs, fun enough gameplay. Kinda goes on for a really long time, though. Fishing is next, which is quite the change. It's fine, you know, standard fishing minigame, but feels like a weird choice for Brodia. It Illusion gets Wyvern Riding, a shoot 'em up minigame that feels really out of place. It also goes on for an insane amount of time. Finally, Solm gets the flea market. You can go there to exchange raw materials for things, but it feels, I don't know, just a little out of place compared to the others. All these minigames suffer from the same problem though. You play them once, you're like, oh, that's kinda cool, and then you never do them again. They're not really worth the time investment, and they aren't fun enough to play just for the sake of it. I can't say I really understand their purpose, but at least they make more sense than the bedroom. This place has gotta be the most engagey room in Engage. In the bedroom, you can change the difficulty, you can view passports, and you can sleep. Big shock, I know. Sleeping passes the time, which doesn't actually do anything, but it also means you're gonna need to be woken up. But a leader can't just get an alarm clock, oh no. Instead, they're always gonna be woken up by one of their clinically insane allies going on a rant about something. This game is really something, you know that. There are a few other things around the Somniel that I'll cover real fast. There's a multiplayer tower I never tried. There's a well that can absolutely shatter the balance of the game. There's a stable where you can take care of various animals you adopt from across your journeys, which is a weird feature that isn't nearly as memorable as it should be. And there's a hut where you can set up your online card. You make the cast do funny poses, amalgamate a catchphrase out of pre-selected words, put some information about your favorite maps and characters, and cover the whole thing in stickers. It's a silly little time waster, but can have some fun results. And that's kinda how I feel about the Somniel as a whole. I like some parts of the Somniel, notably the arena, forge, and dining hall, but as a whole package I think it falls a little flat. There's a lot of things to do, sure, but not many of those things are actually worth doing. I don't dislike the Somniel per se, but I also don't think it really needed to be here. The game isn't built around like the monastery, but it's also too big to be a simple between battle stop like my castle. It's trying to go for the best of both worlds, when it really just doesn't need to be there at all. Engage is sort of a return to form for this series. I think that having a pre-battle menu like the Tellius games would have been better overall. You could still cook, battle, and shop, but cut out all the wandering around, extra doodads you never use, and especially loading times. It could have been a lot better, but compared to some of the other sins Engage commits, it's not the most egregious issue. Anyways, it's high time we move on to something unrelated to gameplay. So how about we take a look at how Engage looks. One thing that changes between almost every Fire Emblem game is their art style. Sometimes it's cartoonish, sometimes it's pseudo-realistic, sometimes it's bright, sometimes it's gritty. They've tried a lot of different aesthetics over the years, and some of them are certainly better than others, but I respect the devs for being willing to try them all. Coming off of Three Houses' darker and washed out look, Engage is one of the brightest and most vibrant games in this series. All the scenery is extremely colorful, and every map or background image really pops out. I think this is the brightest the colors in a Fire Emblem game have been since Mystery of the Emblem back in '94, and I'm all for it. Most of the time, the palette of the game generally matches its tone. Three Houses is a story-heavy game about politics, deceit, and war, and its grittier color scheme fits that extremely well. The GBA games, Blazing Blade especially, have a more lighthearted tone amidst their darker stories, so the vivid colors help to support that. My favorite example of this is the Tellius games. Path of Radiance is a game with a much smaller scale than its sequel. The stakes are lower, the tone is lighter, the gameplay is easier, and has a very cartoony art style. Everyone's portrait is shaded with solid tones, with large anime eyes and big smiles from a lot of the cast. In contrast, Radiant Dawn ups the scale substantially, with the main conflict of the game being a war that engulfs the entire continent and the consequences thereof. To reflect the darker tone of the game, all the portraits have a more lifelike style, with smaller eyes, darker and more realistic shading, and more serious expressions all around. Putting the two side by side is like night and day, but both accomplish the goals very well. You can tell there's a vast tonal difference between the games by looking at how the art style changes. Tangent aside, I bring this up because it applies to Engage in full force. Engage is a game with a generally really lighthearted tone. The story, intentionally or not, is hilarious to watch and impossible to take seriously, and all the characters within are wacky and exaggerated. To match this tone, the art style is equally as upbeat and bright, and fits extraordinarily well. After the more toned down 3DS games and the especially gritty Three Houses, it's nice to get some color back in the world. And on the subject of the world, let's look at battles for a sec. Engage likes adding a bunch of extra stuff to its maps. On top of their actual components, forts, pillars, and the like, Most of them have a bunch of fun background props. Windmills, castles, giant crystal balls, all sort of awesome additions that really bring life to these maps. Most of them feel like more than just a battlefield. They're actual locations in the world that people live in or near. This immersion is further enhanced by the seamless transitions from map to battle. In most of the older games, when two units start a battle, that game will load up a screen showing the terrain they're standing on, and then have them fight there. It works, no doubt, but it can feel a bit separated from the actual map. Engage has two versions of every map at all times, the one you move units around on, and the one the units fight on. These two are one-to-one with each other, and switch out seamlessly to provide a more detailed version of the arena to do battles on. One interesting thing that comes with the second version of the map is the ability to walk around on it after the battle. After you finish a fight on any map, you can freely roam around it, interact with people, collectibles, and animals. Again, it helps to reinforce that these locations are more than just a simple battlefield. A lot of the characters will have pretty diverse dialogue too. Your MVPs of the battle will talk about how well they did, any plot relevant characters will talk about whatever current events are going on, some people will just say things relating to that location. It's a fantastic addition. I hope this returns in the future games. It's an amazing falling action to any battle that helps the world feel that much more alive. And it'd be great to see in a world that actually has interesting things in it, but more on that later. Presentation is more than just models and artwork though. One of my favorite parts that goes off overlooked is UI, and Engage really delivers on this. Besides just having a good font and menu layout, Engage does a lot of subtle things to make the game more readable, for lack of a better term. The biggest and best is the shiny new menu at the bottom of the screen. When hovering over a unit on the map, this display down here will tell you all the relevant combat stats. Attack with their current weapon, hit, avoid, def, res, and finally attack speed. Basically, lets you glance over units and see exactly how they'll perform in combat, without needing to math out any actual stats or move one of your units into range to compare. Speaking of, when you're ready to initiate combat with the unit, the battle forecast screen has been cleaned up nicely too. All the same info you're used to is still there, with the addition of a chart that tells you the exact damage that will be dealt if all hits connect, complete with markers telling you when someone will die and arrows to show the order people will attack in. It's kinda like what Heroes has, except way simpler, most of the time. The two versions of the bottom menu combine to make a much faster gameplay experience that saves you a bunch of math by giving you all the relevant info right where you need it. It saves you a bunch of time by cutting the math, and saves you a bunch of frustration by greatly reducing your chances of getting jump scared by Vantage. Speaking of, again, Engage also completely overhauled the design of skills. Since their reintroduction of Path of Radiance, skills have gone through a few different art styles, but none of them are even close to as good as Engage's. It opts for a minimalistic approach, with nothing but solid colors and occasional gradients. There are a few details in each skill, which helps what is their standout. A bunch of old skills got much needed updates to fit into this style, and everything new fits extremely well and looks spectacular. For the most part. I already talked about this more in depth in my video about skill design across the series, which you should check out, it's pretty good, but I need to at least mention it here. And before I dip into the negatives on aesthetics, I gotta cover sound design real fast. It's not the most noble part of the game, but Engage does it really well. The only thing I really want to mention here is how good effective damage sounds. I don't actually have anything more to say on this. The game has great sound design overall, and this is a standout example. Okay, now on to the bad stuff. Portraits have been removed entirely. They're gone. I get what they were trying to do with this, but it just doesn't work. Portraits have always been an iconic part of the series for a reason. By looking at a person's portrait, you can get a pretty good sense of who they are and how they act. What are their eyes like? Are they looking toward you or at something else? Do they seem interested or like they're looking deeper into you? Are they smiling? Is it a friendly smile? A flirty smile? A mischievous smile? Do they have anything else with the portrait? An arm? What's it doing? What's it represent? You lose the ability to get a quick read on a character without their portrait, and the alternative isn't the same. Engage focuses entirely on a character's model, using that to show character expressions in actions and cutscenes. The problem with this is obvious. You're giving up the lovingly crafted portraits that can perfectly convey a character's emotions and feelings for auto-generated facial movements and a recycled bunch of animations that don't mean anything. It makes it hard to get invested in these characters because it feels like they themselves aren't invested. This decision makes no sense, dude. They had both models and portraits in 3 houses, and though they have the same auto-generated lip sync and reuse animations, it was way less of a big deal because you always had the character's portrait to focus on along with that to get a sense of how they really felt. Models were clearly meant to be the supporting part, and Engage got rid of the main event to focus entirely on the support without giving it the tools to work properly. Plus, some of these animation choices are fucking nuts. This was a terrible choice. I really hope they bring portraits back. They're an iconic part of the series for a big reason, and proof they need to think about why something is there before you get rid of it. Now then, let's get into Engage's biggest aesthetic offense by far: character design. Fire Emblems had a reputation over the years having more than a few characters who look basically the same. You know, if you got your blue-haired Smash Lords, your interchangeable red and green calves, your 3,000-year-old dragons, all characters their parents probably wouldn't be able to tell apart. Three Houses brought this to an extreme by giving everyone the same outfit in part 1. Now, I think doing this was actually a great idea, because A, it made us focus on their differentiating features, like Sylvain's open coat or Leonie's jacket being tied around her waist. B, it indirectly made the character focus more on their face and hair, which makes it much more shocking to see what happens when we look like post-time skip. And similarly, C, when the time skip happens, everyone gets more traditional Fire Emblem designs. It's after you spend half the game getting to know the characters. It's awesome to see them wear an outfit that matches the personality you've come to love, or interesting to see them wearing something completely different from what you thought and trying to learn why. Look, the point is, Three Houses' similar uniforms was a brilliant decision by the designers. They're not the flashiest designs ever, but their subtleties is what makes them work. Plus the universal black and yellow color scheme is easy on the eyes. Now in typical Engage tradition, I had to take this thing that worked very well in Three Houses and completely flip it on its head. Engage's character design is very distinct, to say the least. The colors are extremely bright and every character looks different from each other. The problem is, it also really sucks, for a myriad of reasons. Let's start with the most noticeable, the bits and bobs. Engaged characters sort of just, have things on their clothes that don't make any sense. Tamara's a good example of this. She's the princess of Solm, she fights with a spear, she likes cooking, singing, and eating meat, and she has this really out there, cheerful personality. For some reason, she's also covered with these pink, yellow, and blue balls. They are worn by any other Solm royals, and they aren't explained in any support convos. I think the designers added them to reflect her bubbly personality, but there's no in-universe explanation for this. It's a small thing, but Engage is filled with stuff like this. Why does Yunaka have star stickers all over her body? She's supposed to be a thief, won't they stand out? Again, it reflects her personality, but it's not explaining the universe. Hortensia dresses like a clown, with swirly pink and white hair that probably tastes like peppermint. This makes a bit more sense in universe, but it also looks like crap. I don't think any individual character has a weirder design than Zelkov. Don't get me wrong, I love Zelkov. He's one of the only well-written characters in this game, but his design is just all sorts of whack. He wears a cloak that has eyes all over it, makes it look like he's in a cult. He has a skin tone I can only call gray, that's really unusual and unlike anybody else in the cast. And for some reason his cloak has 800 keys inside of it. There is no explanation at all for these keys, by the way. Not a single support addresses them, so your guess as to why they're there is as good as mine. Anyways, the other oddities of Zelkov's design actually directly relate to the other, bigger problem with Engage's character design philosophy. The reason I rambled about Three Houses' similar character design earlier is because Engage has the exact opposite thing going on. It's so focused on making every character look distinct that it forgets to make them look coherent as a whole. It seriously looks like a different person was asked to design every character in this game. Some of them look like they're supposed to be in completely different games from each other. This problem becomes increasingly apparent as the game goes on, because it's not actually there at first. Fiorene's character design actually rules. All the lords in her tier share a similar color palette, using whites, yellows, oranges, and washed out greens. It gives the nation a distinct clothing style that it abides to. It makes it feel like these characters all came from the same place, which is great. After Fiorene, most of the groups of people from any nation share very little similarities with their designs, aside from their royals. Elugia especially looks like they just had 4 leftover characters they didn't know what to do with, so they just threw them into there. Also, I love that not a single person from Elugia, the kingdom where it's constantly snowing, is dressed for any sort of cold weather. Most of them are showing a lot of skin actually, it's great. Speaking of skin, let's talk Solm. So, in Solm, the royal family is entirely black. The citizens are all black. The retainers, white as a sheet. Why? You guys get the idea now. Engage is more focused on making fun and wacky characters than making designs that actually make sense in the world they tried to build. I love a fun design, but you can't just give things to people for the sake of giving them things. You should be able to tell a lot about a character just from their design. The kind of place they're from, the kind of things they do, the kind of things they're going to take on, the way they act and maybe even talk. Everything on a well-designed character is there for a reason. Adding a bunch of balls onto Tamara because they're funny doesn't show us anything about Tamara, it's just confusing. But I think it's enough of looking at Engage's characters. How about we learn some stuff about them and their world? That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the big one. Let's talk about... Look, I know I bring up the Three Houses comparison a lot, but that's because that was the bar Engage was supposed to meet. Not only was Three Houses a game immediately preceding it, it was by far the biggest in the franchise. If you played any Fire Emblem, you played Three Houses. It brought in a ton of new fans. Probably the biggest thing that made people enjoy Three Houses so much was its amazing story. Three Houses was a tale of political intrigue with several factions at work at any time, all navigating around and manipulating the extremely thoroughly explored world of Fodlan. It was a really tough act to follow, and almost anything after it wouldn't have been quite as good. But what we ended up getting was a bit more of a letdown than expected. Engage is set in the world of Elios, a strange ring-shaped continent with an island in the middle. Compared to Fodlan, Lieb, Arcanea, or, any other continent in Fire Emblem, Elios feels very bare bones. We learn almost nothing about the 5 countries and how they interact with each other. These guys like peace. These guys like war. These guys are evil. These guys are independent. The only ones with any direct relationship of any kind are Brody and Elugia constantly fighting. The other two are just kinda... there. They're all governed with the same monarchy system, and the only thing that makes it feel any different from one another is the individual biome that makes up their entire country. These feel less like nations and more like Hogwarts houses. There's just not enough going on here. The continent doesn't feel like it's a part of a believable world. It feels like it's a location in a video game, which would be fine for something like Mario, but in a series known for deep world building and political dramas, it just doesn't belong. Actually, come to think of it, Mario Odyssey has those travel brochures that give a ton of details on the kingdoms you visit, down their industry and climate, so it's not even fair to compare Elios to that. When Super Mario Odyssey is more in-depth worldbuilding than your entry in a series about political drama, you've just done something horribly wrong. As for the plot itself, it's nothing you haven't seen before, just worse. The story is literally just awakenings. In this Fire Emblem, you play as everyone's favorite avatar character who awakens from a slumber with amnesia. You get attacked by a bunch of zombies, and then find out they're being brought about by the Fell Dragon, who is some evil cult is trying to revive. To try to stop them from doing that, you go on a quest around the world to collect the magical MacGuffins while recruiting a crazy assortment of characters along the way. But eventually, it's revealed that the Avatar is actually the offspring of the Fell Dragon. Oh no! But they realize that they're more than that, and with the power of friendship and the bonds they formed along the way, they're able to vanquish the Fell Dragon and live happily ever after in whatever continent it is. Like I said, it's Awakenings beat for beat. The thing is, Awakening's story is already pretty bad, but paired with Engage's horrendous storytelling, it just gets worse. It's the same spiel but with bigger plot holes and worse writing. I gave the story a good, honest attempt when I first played through, and enjoyed it well enough. But the more I thought about it, the worse it got. For starters, the writing is just terrible. All the moment-to-moment interactions feel really unnatural, with barely any characters speaking like actual people in actual situations.
I guess Fell Dragons have to die in the end. But I wanted to be a good dragon.
And when the game tries to foreshadow something, it does it so obviously that a 2-year-old will be able to figure out the zany twist that's coming up.
We should discuss our other option. That is, the far greater power only we know about.
The whole game just has this feeling of being slightly off in its dialogue, which sometimes is due to wacky writing, and sometimes due to unrelatable characters, but more on that later. It really isn't helped by the aforementioned lack of portraits, meaning that while reading through this first draft dialogue, the only thing you have to look at are character models cycling through the same few animations. Stilted dialogue with stilted animations. How incredibly immersive. If I were to go over every bad instance of storytelling in Engage, we'd be here forever. But there are some moments that I really need to look at. Most of these have no doubt been discussed to death and back, but I'd be remiss not to talk about them. And on the subject of death, let's start with Lumira. You'll notice that I'm not talking about her in the character section. That's because she's not a character, she's a plot device. Lumira is Alir's mom, and one of the first people you see after waking up. She gives you some exposition about the world, you spar in chapter 2, and then she dies. Too bad, so sad, we hardly knew ye. Fire Emblem parents dying is nothing new, but Lumira takes it above and beyond by having the longest death scene known to man. She spends an entire 6 full-ass minutes dying, and it has exactly 0 emotional impact because we don't know the character at all. I genuinely think her death scene is longer than every scene spent with her alive. I know everybody brings this up in particular, but the Switch's screen goes dark mid-cutscene because of how goddamn long this idiot takes to die. It's actually comical. But that's not even the punchline, oh no! In the game's penultimate chapter, you end up face to face with Lumiere again, except she's been zombified by the big bad. She's all evil and stuff, so you have to beat her up again, the usual. Except, when you beat her, she regains her memories or whatever, and you have to go through another 5-minute long death scene. Why? She's still a blank slate character with no personality. Why does she get the 2 longest death scenes in the entire game? The second one somehow has even less impact than the first because we've already seen it. God damn, this character pisses me off. Shows up, exposits, dies for 5 minutes, shows up again, dies for another 5 minutes, refuses to elaborate. 3 alts and heroes. That's more than Hubert, by the way. Here's a good one for you. In Chapter 10, Aaliyah and friends go to storm the place where the Fell Dragon and his homies are hanging out, and it turns out to be a trap. They end up losing all the Emblem rings they've gathered, getting betrayed, witness the Fell Dragon come back, and get their escape cut off by a bunch of baddies. They've got Sombra on one side, the 4 hounds on the other, and no clear escape route. How are they gonna get out of this one?
Back! Give them back to me!
Oh, okay then. I guess they just do. Great. While on the subject of Chapter 10, let's rewind a bit and look at the intro to the chapter. In this, Aaliyah and friends are heading to the church that's housing Fell Dragon worshippers, and if there's one thing that they really don't want to do, it's letting Sombron get the Emblem rings. That'd be really bad. So what do? That's right, they walk in with all 6 of them and let them take them. That sucks, but there's nothing could have done, right? Well... So, your main base of operations in this game is the Somniel. The Somniel can only be entered by those given permission by the Divine Dragon. The Somniel has a place to store Emblem rings. Do you see the issue here? There is no reason that Aaliyah couldn't have just left 1 ring on the Somniel as a worst case scenario backup. Letting Sombron have 5 rings is bad, sure, but it's better than letting him have all 6. More importantly, it'd make it literally impossible for him to get all of them. There isn't a single thing he could do if one of the rings was up there. These guys are playing defense, have a literally impenetrable fortress, and still lose. Amazing. Actually, let's talk for a bit about the Emblem rings, because there's a few glaring issues we got with them. So, the rings are these 12 pieces of jewelry that hold spirits of the ages past in the forms of previous lords. These emblems are mostly corporeal, can be interacted with, grant tremendous power to whomever holds them, and when they're all together, they can grant a wish once a millennia. That's cool and all, but like, what are they? Why do they have all these awesome powers? It's never explained where they came from, why they can do these things, or how long they've been around. There's so many questions about them that the game never bothers to address. The 5 nations have special sanctuaries designed to protect and hide these all-powerful legendary items, and they are literally the titular mechanic of the game. Yet somehow, they completely miss getting an ounce of world building. To add insult to injury, every single past game that has similar items of mass power, which is basically all of them, has some proper explanation for who, where, and why. Take a look at Alib's legendary weapons, for example. They are forged to combat dragons, but sealed away because they are too powerful. 8 of them were wielded by legendary heroes of long ago, and now being recovered by Roy and his boys to fight the returning dragons. And that's all you need, why they exist, what they do, and who used them. The Emblem rings have none of that, and as such, feel very disconnected from the world, despite, again, being the mechanic on the front of the box. Let's talk about bosses for a second. Everyone loves them. They're the big bads you take down at the end of most chapters. They have big stats, some dialogue, and sometimes good drops. But more importantly, it's just really satisfying to kill them. But hey, you remember that one part of 3 Houses that nobody liked where basically every major boss just retreats at least twice so you have to fight them over and over again? Well, if you didn't like that, you'll hate it now. Boss retreats happen comically often in Gage. Minor bosses retreat and end up being fought multiple times, and major bosses can be fought upwards of 5 times. I decided to crunch some numbers to see how big of an issue this actually is. Firstly, there are only 17 bosses in Engage, while there are 27 chapters. Considering 90% of the maps are defeat boss, that's a really low number. So I count out how many times you fight each one of them, and yeah, it's really something. Less than half the bosses are fought once, and one of those is a generic corrupted that barely counts anyways. Like, come on man, the generic ass first boss is fought twice for some reason. Did they just not have time to make new models or something? Anyways, refighting bosses this many times completely eliminates any threat they pose. You fight the hounds once, it's kinda scary. You fight them for the 5th time, it's the same old song and dance at this point. Plus, it gets rid of that aforementioned thrill of killing a powerful boss, especially the ones with story relevance. Take Nourishment from Binding Blade, for example. The dude's a major antagonist for the first part of the game, constantly getting your way and teasing Roy and his team. Then, in chapter 16, you actually go up against him. You steal his shield, fight him, and he dies. It feels good. In Engage, the hounds constantly show up to kinda bother you, you fight them, they flee, and after doing that 4 times, one of them joins you, and the other 3 die in cutscenes. Spectacular. But maybe there's a lore reason for that. I mean, this is the world where the Draconic Time Crystal exists. This thing is the lore reason for being able to warp back a few turns after getting destroyed by a 2% crit. Again. This isn't the first time the series has done something like this, and I like its integration in the last 2 games. In Echoes, Miller's turn wheel is a holy item that has added story functionality of being able to see past events. It's an incredibly strong religious item. It is the reason Silk seeks out Alm. There's another one that Celica starts with because her quest starts at a shrine to Milla. And then at the end, the 2 turn wheels together open the door to the final boss. It's great. In 3 houses, Divine Pulse is an ability Byleth has thanks to the power of Sothis dwelling within them. As your bond with Sothis increases, you'll get access to more of them. It's, again, a powerful ability that stems from the God of the Land, and while I don't like its implementation as much as in Echoes, I think it makes sense in the story. In Engage, the Time Crystal is a thing you pick up from Vale that has powers. It doesn't have any background, it's just a thing that's here. Gah! Why does this game keep doing this? Anyways, my brilliant theory is that Sombron must have a time crystal of his own that he keeps using to bring back his own units, because he got tired of us doing it all the time. And you know what? It's more explanation this thing has, so I'm going with that as canon. One notable thing missing from Engage are interesting recruitments. This sort of falls into the gameplay and character segments, but I feel like it fits here. One of the coolest things from the older games is finding and assembling this ragtag group of dimwits through all matters of method. Binding Blade especially stands out in this regard, since your army really does feel like it's assembled out of anyone Roy could find. There's a brigand that you have to be nice to, there's a scam artist you have to pay to recruit, there's a red unit that you can't kill to get him to join you, there's a thief that you have to talk to in 3 separate maps, there's a horseman that you can only talk to if you go out of your way to save another horseman on a different map, and then have her talk to him, and so on. It's a unique collection of recruitments for a diverse collection of characters. Unfortunately, Engage does away with this more so than any other game in this series. It takes after Fates, where a large chunk of the cast is Lord plus 2 retainers, but even that had the famous Shura or Boots decision. Of all the units who don't just join you on their own, you've got 2 green units that you talk to in paralogs, 1 green unit that you talk to on a map, and 1, count it, 1 red unit you can convince to switch sides. It's so mundane, and completely removes one of the defining features of the series. It's fun to see what weird characters you can turn into turncoats, and figuring out how to recruit them. It's a staple of the older games that simply isn't here anymore, with exactly one exception. It just makes the world of Engage feel even flatter than it already is. Engage's story is a disaster, all in all. Fire Emblem is a series known for having epic tales of war for good versus evil across a sprawling and deeply explored continent. Following up games like Mystery of the Emblem, Genealogy, Binding Blade, Radiant Dawn, and especially 3 Houses is difficult. But this doesn't even seem like they were trying. The world is as bare bones as they come, with very little thought put into even the most basic of elements. The relationship between the factions in the world is non-existent, leading to a severe lack of stakes and immersion. The plot is a rehash of an already mediocre story at best, and an unintentional comedy at worst. And the whole thing is held together by some of the worst writing I've ever seen. It's impossible to get invested because nobody talks in a believable way. More than anything, Engage's story feels like a first draft. All these problems are things you'd mark as something to come back to and fix up, but then they just never did. I don't know what happened. Even at its lowest point, Fire Emblem's never been quite this bad at storytelling. I'm seriously hoping that Insys learns from the mistakes with this one. Bring back the 3 House Riders, give your current ones a raise, hire like 20 more, I don't know, just do something about this. Fire Emblem can do better. Fire Emblem is supposed to do better, and Fire Emblem deserves better. Because, ironically enough, Engage's story is the least engaging of any in the entire series, and it's not even close. Now it's time for a quick detour into the realm of DLC, because I want to talk about the Xenologue, the side campaign for Engage. It came out as the 4th wave of DLC, after all the extremely fun Emblem bracelets. At this point, Fire Emblem's no stranger to DLC campaigns, with Heirs of Fate and Sitter's Shadows, so it's still surprised that Engage got one. And like all those, it deals with some crazy alternate universe shenanigans and has quite a few similar mechanics. In the Xenologue, Alira is summoned into a parallel version of Elios by a duo of Fell Dragon twins, Nil and Nell, and is tasked with helping them collect all 7 Emblem bracelets from the leaders of the nations. Typically by force. This is because all the characters were used to have their personalities flipped around, and since every character engaged is chill and nice and boring like that, it means they're basically all evil now. The Xenologue really embraces the reverse world of Elios by actually having a pretty decent story. What it comes at the cost of, we'll get to later, but the plot's not actually bad here. The story follows Alira, Nil, and Nell, and their protectors, the 4 Winds. The Winds are the opposite version of Sombron's cronies, the Hounds. Instead of Zephia, Gris, Marnie, and Mavir, we've got Celestia, Gregory, Madeline, and Mavir again. Okay. Along with the squad working to collect the bracelets, there's some underlying story about the Draconic duo. After every map, we get a flashback of their youth and some lore about Nil. While in the present, we learn that Nell's been killing all the royals after retrieving the bracelets. This culminates when we learn that the royals have been dead for ages, and the ones we see are corrupted, and that Nil has been creating them to carry on Sombron's legacy. The cool part about this is you can actually figure this out before the story reveals it, since every royal is weak to corrupted effective weapons. Nil then gets all the bracelets, turns into a big dragon, ends up killing Nell, and promises to revive her after 1,000 years. And since time flows in funny ways, he gets all that done in time to join the real campaign. Meanwhile, Mavir 2 uses a warp staff in canon, and that alone makes this story great. All joking aside, the Xenologue has a great sense of dread to it. You feel like you're fighting a losing battle at all times. The nations all hate each other and are on the verge of tearing each other apart. The emblems aren't there to help you, since they can't be summoned properly. Your group of allies is extremely small, and they don't really have much to look forward to. Eventually, they discover they're the only humans left in all of Elios, and that just further increases that sense of hopelessness. They're alone and lost in a world full of evil beings that want them dead. And just when they couldn't get any lower, they get betrayed by Nil. It's great, and it really helps that the Winds actually have some nice moments by themselves. They're a great group with a lot of chemistry with each other, and it makes it more tragic to see them stuck in this terrible land. I'll dig a bit more into these guys when we talk about characters, but let me know now that they're some of the best in the game. Now, because this is Engage, the story still isn't perfect. There are less super apparent plot holes and everything has a just reason for happening, but there are still some weird quirks regardless. Like, after Nil reveals himself as the big bad and everyone goes to stop him, the gang all beats him up and then just leaves him there and departs. Okay, yeah, sure, you're not gonna take him with you or bind him or kill him or anything. I'm sure nothing bad will come of that. As for the writing,
yes, there is the brother I know. The fearsome man they called the Prince of Strewn Flowers.
Not much better. But in spite of that, the world and characters are compelling enough to get invested in, and it feels like there's real stakes and motivations to fight onward. It's crazy that this solid story is tied to the disaster that is Engage. Maybe they got a completely different team for it or something. But hey, a good story with Engage's phenomenal gameplay sounds like a perfect Fire Emblem, right? Well, let's start on a positive note here. The DLC adds 2 new classes, and both are unlocked once you beat the campaign. These are the Armored Mage Cannoneer and the Chi Adept Enchanter, both completely new classes in the series with super unique mechanics. Mostly. Cannoneer is a class that functions completely differently from everything else in the game. They have their own weapon type, their damage scales off dex rather than strength or magic, but their hit factors in strength and build of all stats. And most importantly, they have 3 to 10 range. Basically, they're a modernized version of ballisticians, and just like ballisticians, they're incredibly good. They can't double and their weapons can't be forged, but they have cannonballs that are effective against any type of unit, most notably corrupted. Now, that alone is already enough to make them like the best class in the game. But then you realize they can give a Cannoneer Lucina for a 10 range backup, and the game balance just shatters. They may be broken, but I love them. Enchanter is a much more complicated class to explain, because they're a truly completely new idea. Enchanters are units that use knives and arts, and have really bad stats, on par with dancers. Fortunately, they don't need stats. The main appeal of enchanters is their unique ability to, well, enchant things. This comes in the form of the weapon and item surge they have. Weapon surge effectively makes them eat an item, like say a hand axe, and then for the rest of that map, every single hand axe in your army will gain a boost. It's a nice mechanic, the one I keep forgetting about, because it pales in comparison to item surge. This lets an enchanter eat a consumable item, like a vulnerary antitoxin or, most notably, tonic, and grant nearby allies a boost based on what they ate. Vulns will heal, antitoxins cure statuses, but tonics provide a wide myriad of buffs depending on what stat it was for. These include things like reflecting damage, ignoring backups, having weapon weight, the list goes on. Best of all, the class skill they get lets them access the convoy, so you don't have to ferry a leader around with them to buff properly. Enchanters are super fun to use, and add an extra layer of strategy to the game. They let you adapt to situations and respond in ways you couldn't before. I'm really hoping they make a return later. In my run, I decided to make Vander, the Jagan, my enchanter. They don't care about stats at all, so why not, right? It looks funny. Plus, an enchanter with convoy access and Micaiah who can whip out any staff they need for any situation is an unbeatable support unit. I love this class, and I love Cannoneer. But as fun as they and the new units are to use, I'm not sure it's worth getting them, because to do that, you actually have to play the Xenologue. I've been putting off talking about the gameplay of the Xenologue for a reason, and that's because, well, it's terrible. I don't know what happened, but this is one of the least fun Fire Emblem experiences you can endure, right behind Gaiden without emulator speed up. It's only 6 maps long, but those are 6 of the longest, most tedious maps in the series. My first real issue with the Xenologue comes in its difficulty. It's chosen independently of the main campaign, and can fortunately be switched around at will. So, here's the thing. On normal mode, these maps are mind-numbingly easy. They can be beaten without a single thought, the enemies barely pose any threat, they're just tedious to get through. It sucks. But then you turn it up to hard, and it's a whole nother story. The enemies massively outnumber and outstat you, they have access to classes you don't, and there are tons of reinforcements. It's nearly impossible to get past the second map on hard. It's insufferably annoying. Maddening, I don't even want to think about. The problem is, there's no good difficulty. Easy doesn't pose any challenge, it becomes tedious, and hard is nightmarishly difficult and infuriating. This alone would be excusable, but the maps themselves wouldn't be fun in a perfectly balanced game either. Think of all the criticism Revelations gets for all of its maps, and then imagine they're all actually as bad as people say. Every map is insanely gimmicky, and while 2 of them are decently fun, the other 4 are pure misery. To briefly go through them all, Chapter 1 sees you fight a bunch of unique wolf enemies. It's a decent challenge, but it can also be turbo cheese with Sigurd. I like the freedom. Chapter 2 is Fear, and you're throwing approximately 800 million units at you, most of which being enchanters that you don't know how to counter. It's almost fun, and it's the one I could see growing on me in the future. Chapter 3 isn't, though. This one's an absolutely relentless assault of armors, flyers, and mages with cannoneers on either side constantly whittling you down. It's nightmarishly annoying. Fortunately, if you can slog through that, you're treated to Chapter 4, which is actually one of my favorites in the whole game. It's easy in the middle of a massive battle between Solom and Elugia, and is the only map to have yellow units. There's a lot of strategy at play here. The 2 sides will fight each other, so you have to pick your fights carefully to take out enough units on each side that'll keep each other at bay. If you play properly, you can even get one of the bosses to suicide onto an enemy, and then you take out the other one for a well-earned win. I love this map. It feels like it's taken right out of Radiant Dawn, and is one I thoroughly enjoy on hard difficulty. However, there has to be a catch, and this one's really nasty. This map is one of 3 in the entire game that leads straight into another map. No Somniel or breaks in between. This means you can't change the difficulty between the two, which is a shame because I like Chapter 4 on hard, but utterly detest Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is probably the worst in the whole game. In it, Alira is completely isolated from the group and can't do anything. Nell is on her own fighting Nil and basically can't do anything. And your team has to navigate through this hellhole filled with wolves, enchanters, miasma, and a ton of enemies that can't be counterattacked at all. And it's a recipe for disaster. Eventually, a worm will start attacking the literally defenseless Alira, and you have to keep one of your units back to use physic on her every turn, or she'll die. And sometimes, even that isn't enough. Or alternatively, Nell will just get killed by Nil, and you'll lose through no fault of your own. Great! But the worst part of this map is the soundtrack. It's got this awesome original map track used in some of the Xenologue chapters, and it makes them slightly more tolerable. Great piece. However, as soon as Nil starts fighting Nell, which will be turn 1, it switches to this extremely repetitive boss track that then continues to play for the entire map, making your suffering that much worse. This map is unplayable on hard difficulties, which is especially bad because it is the only map in the Xenologue where you can't change the difficulty of it beforehand, and that's because it's tied to the best map in the Xenologue. Oh! Chapter 6 is one I've heard is miserable. I wouldn't know. I've always played on the lowest difficulty and just cheesed it. After Chapter 5, I just don't have the energy. The maps in the Xenologue are a colossal slog to get through on their own. If they were just released like this, it'd be the worst thing Engage offers. But somehow, I haven't even touched on the worst part of it. The player balancing. In all the other DLC campaigns, you're given a preset selection of units with preset stats, builds, and levels. In Awakening Fates, it's the child units. In Three Houses, it's a collection of lords and students from various houses. In Engage, you get whatever your current army is, but still with the restriction of preset builds and stats. This is a really stupid decision. For starters, it means the game will be vastly easier the later into a run you do it. Not only are there more options for you, but anyone who starts promoted in the main story doesn't turn into a base class for the first levels of the Xenologue, and ends up being strictly better than their contemporaries through higher bases and class skills. But some of them won't even be useful because of reclassing, or the lack thereof. There are a lot of units in Engage who only really become great after reclassing. Kagetsu is a good example, because he has phenomenal stats that are only limited by his mediocre class. Or Anna, who is designed to teach you to use reclassing. She starts out in a terribly unfitting base class, but if you give her 5 levels and a second seal, she becomes a fantastic mage. But in the Xenologue, everyone is stuck in their base class, for better, or more likely, for worse. So if you want to use Anna here, she's stuck as a berserker with the scummiest stats you have ever seen. It directly goes against one of the main design philosophies of the gauge, but I can see the reasoning here. The Xenologue is designed to give you a preset selection of units who will always be relatively equal power with each other and their base game counterparts across all playthroughs, and I could see that solid justification. If it weren't for one little thing. The core design of the DLC side chapters across all the games is simple. Preset units, same every time. I've been over this. So, why, dare I ask, do Emblem bonds carry over into the Xenologue? You have access to all the emblems you do in the main game, and they all maintain their bond with every character. This completely disrupts the idea and balance of the entire mode. If you let us carry over emblem bonds, why not let us carry over our entire army of units who we have built as we want them? If you give us pre-built units, why do you let us keep the bonds to get units who are way stronger than they should be? It tries to go for the best of both worlds in a situation where that isn't an option. The fun of these levels is supposed to be figuring out how to get through them with the tools you're given, but that puzzle can't be shattered if we bring in a level 20 Roy Bandolier to the first chapter, where units aren't even promoted yet. It's a terrible balancing choice that makes absolutely no sense, and has a super simple fix too. Our units all have set levels across chapters, Just make every ring have a set bond level across them too. That's it. That's all you had to do. God damn, I hate this thing. But somehow, I haven't even gotten to the worst of it yet. Let's talk about your grand reward for completing this slogfest and how it measures up to the others. In Fates, completing each chapter of Heirs of Fate will reward you with a powerful skill to use on your current file. Most of them are stat taker skills that have become a mainstay, and completing the hardest will give you the extremely powerful point blank, like an archer attack at one range. These are really powerful skills, and I like how they're implemented. They're nice to have, but not so game changing that I feel obligated to get them. Additionally, you can skip to any chapter of Heirs that you want, so if you only want Strength Taker or Point Blank for a build and don't care about the others, you don't need to get them. Three Houses has the opposite approach. Beating Cinder Shells will unlock the Ashen Wolves and the Abyss, but for every file after you beat the story once. I also really like this. Characters are important, and are a much more enticing incentive to complete a side story than a few skills, but the game knows that, and doesn't force you to play through it every time you want them, because that would be a slog. Now, knowing how excellently its predecessors handled rewards, can you guess what Engage does? That's right, it's a disastrous mix of both! Beating the entire Xenologue will unlock 5 new characters, but only for the file you're currently playing on. Why? Characters are important, and these characters are some of my favorites in the game, be it in gameplay, in story, or both. But I don't want to have to suffer through 6 maps of pain for them every single time. This was okay in Fates because I only got a skill out of it, but after what Three Houses did with the Ashen Wolves, this is unacceptable. Did they just forget how to design this? What happened? I'm genuinely looking into modding my Switch so I can get these guys without going through all the pain and suffering. I love these units, but it's not worth dragging myself through 6 of the worst designed chapters to get them. Fortunately, someone on Game Banana thinks so too, cause the mod's out there, and next time I play Engage, there's a good chance I'll have it installed. The Fell Xenologue depicts a backwards and twisted version of Engage, on a few levels. The story's pretty good, but comes at a harsh cost. The gameplay is confused, unbalanced, tedious, and somehow manages to fumble the core mechanic of the side story. All of this would be tolerable if the rewards weren't locked behind repeat playthroughs. 2 of the most fun classes and 5 completely unique characters are stuck behind the 6 chapter slogfest on every single playthrough. Three Houses did this exact scenario so much better. I don't know why they couldn't just copy from it. All of the ingredients for a great side story were right there, but somehow they dropped the ball more than I thought could even be possible. The Xenologue is by far the worst of the DLC stories thus far, and easily my least favorite part of Engage. If the fact that I'm thinking of modifying my game file so they don't have to play it doesn't prove that, I don't know what will. But isn't all bad. We got 2 original classes and 5 actually great characters out of it, so that's something. And speaking of, I think it's finally come to look at the part I saved for last. Engage's wonderfully colorful cast of... Despite what Smash fans will tell you, the Fire Emblem series has a very wide and diverse cast of characters. In fact, the characters are oftentimes the most memorable parts of the games. Growing attached to them through supports and gameplay growth is part of the Fire Emblem experience. Now, Engage had a really tough act to follow in making its roster. Coming off the heels of arguably the 2 strongest casts the series has ever seen is no easy feat. Did it succeed? Well, what makes a good Fire Emblem character? It's a tough question with no clear answer, but I think as a basis, they should try to find a nice middle ground between the 2 extreme ends we've seen. On one hand, you've got the stoic and serious, a bit of realism to ground someone, but if that's all they have, they become boring. On the flip side, you've got exotic and quirky, a bit of spice to give them flavor, but too much and they become obnoxious. A character should, ideally, end up near the middle of this spectrum, where they have some memorable and interesting traits, but are still grounded by a serious backstory, rules, or morals. If you tip too far to one end, you end up with a Kain. If you tip too far to the other side, you get an Ileana. The goal is trying to find someone in that perfect middle ground, and a great character who I think perfectly fits there is Ike. Ike is a serious character who's motivated to avenge his father and bring equality to all Tellius. but also stays as an interesting and unique character due to his blunt way of talking and relations with the major figures of Tellius. Ike's a character who exhibits both sides of the chart very well, and brings out the best trait of a character in the middle: relatability. The best kinds of characters are the ones we can understand and connect with. We may not relate to everything that Ike goes through, but we can understand and relate to how he reacts to the scenarios he's in and interacts with the people he's with. And that's an important part of finding a balance. If a character leans too far to one end, they feel robotic and devoid of personality. If a character leans too far to the other, they feel alien and unfamiliar. The middle ground is a perfect combination where a character feels relatable and, more importantly, human. Now, I bring this up because it applies on a grander scale than the characters. Because of how the games are written, most of them can be placed on the spectrum based on their overall cast. Doing so produces something like this. Nothing too unexpected, I'm sure. The games with well-renowned casts end up in the middle, while the games with generally less favored characters end up on either side. Every game that leans in one direction definitely has some exceptions, but as a whole, I think this is where they go. Now then, you'll notice one game missing from here, and that's the one we're talking about right now. Well, it is on the list. Let's talk about Engage's roster. Making good characters work in a bad story is a difficult task, but it's not impossible to do. Just look at FE7, the game produced a ton of fan favorites. You got Hector, Sarah, Canas, a bunch of fleshed out, interesting or funny characters who managed to escape the mediocre writing of FE7's story. And here we are, 10 games later with a less than mediocre story and a whole new cast. Engage's roster has some really strong points. There are a few characters we can see sticking around as fan favorites for a long while, but unfortunately, they are the minority in Engage. There are a lot of characters in the game who are just boring, or annoying, or out of place, or just not fleshed out enough. And while these are all different issues depending on the character, they all stem from the same root problem. Every character in this game is fucking insane. Almost nobody in Engage actually feels or acts like a real person. A large chunk of the cast leans so far over to the left side of the chart that they're basically falling over. This manifests in different ways on different characters, but for a lot of them, it's more similar than you think. Let's go back to Ileana for a sec. Ileana is a character who has one, not even personality trait or even running joke, just one thing. That thing is that she's always hungry. She brings it up in every support, base convo, battle quote, every line she has revolves around her appetite. The thing is, being hungry is not a personality trait, nor is it some kind of hilarious joke. When that's the only thing your character has, they don't have anything. Ileana is a boring and annoying character because this is the only thing she has going for her. Every interaction with her is predictable and repetitive, which ends up making her annoying to talk to. Now, imagine if half the cast was Ileana, and that's Engage. Characters with minimal personality traits who have a single gimmick they bring up multiple times in every convo. Except instead of being hungry, it's tea for Celine, cute things for Rosado, working out for Etier, crying for Boucheron, money for Citrine. Oh wait, but here's Chloe. She has 2 gimmicks: unusual food and fairy tales. Wow, the writing team really outdid themselves this time. Seriously though, almost all the characters are insufferable to watch supports for because of how ungodly repetitive they are. Chloe, Celine, and Rosado are the real highlights of this group because they have practically non-existent personality aside these gimmicks, even less so than Ileana. Genuinely obnoxious supports to watch, they are so monotonous. Now, there are ways to make this archetype enjoyable. There are even characters in Engage who do. Amber's main things is that he likes alpacas and wants to be a legendary hero. On paper, this just sounds like Chloe again, but Amber's just, I don't know, written better. He feels like he has substantially more going on than Chloe, and more importantly, he's written as a comic relief and a loser, and he's really good at it. He's genuinely one of the funniest characters in the cast, probably second only to the other great example. So, Bunet is functionally the closest to Ileana. He likes to cook and eat things. So what makes him so much better than everyone else? Well, he's an actual psychopath. The closest character I can compare Bunet to is Henry, which is a great sign. The dude wants to eat everything. Rocks? Yeah. Weapons? Yeah. Armor? Yeah. People in armor? You bet. Emblem rings? Divinely tasty. An emblem ring with an emblem inside it? Absolutely. This dude is a menace to society. He leans so far into his gimmick that he becomes one of the most entertaining characters in the whole game, and I wish more people were like him. Outside of extremely prominent gimmick characters, there are some other members of the cast who almost escape single gimmick hell, but get held back by Engage's underwhelming writing. The best example of this is Yunaka. Now, Yunaka is a fan favorite character who I almost get the appeal of. She has a good backstory and talks in middle-aged dad sayings to try to hide her past. That's the foundation of a good character, but the problem comes when she's trying to hide her backstory. There's this ongoing joke that she's really bad at lying, and makes it super obvious when she's trying to dance around her past, but the other character in the convo doesn't notice. Not a bad gag to pull out every now and again, but the problem is, they use it in like every support she has, which makes it obnoxious and predictable, and falls back to the same problem as the aforementioned characters. In almost any other game, I'm sure she'd be great, but she's unfortunately stuck in Engage, where she gets the short end of the stick for writing and character design. Seriously, what is with these stars? Now, somehow, they also managed to screw up the emblems, which should even be possible. They're pre-existing characters with their own personality traits and everything, but Engage just finds a way. Case in point, Chrom. Now, I'm far from the biggest Chrom fan. I think he's a pretty nothing character who doesn't have a lot going on. And apparently, the Engage writers agreed, because they gave him this weird gimmick of breaking everything he touches. I haven't played Awakening in a while, but I'm pretty sure Chrom has more than that going on. I think he broke a wall in a support or something, though that may have been in Heroes. But it's a really weird thing to make his entire personality in Engage, especially when Dimitri, the character known for breaking things with his insane strength, is right there. None of the other emblems get hit as hard as Chrom does in character butchering, which I'm thankful for. If you're gonna weirdly twist any of these guys by making up traits and gimmicks, I'm glad it was Chrom, so I have something to remember him for. Not every character in Engage is bad, far from it. Even if a good chunk of the cast is pretty one-note, that doesn't stop the rest of them from being fleshed out. There are lots of characters in Engage who find a perfect spot in the middle of the spectrum. Diamant and Ivy nicely justify their popularity by being fully realized deep characters who have charming personalities. Zelkov is actually one of the most human members of the cast. I found myself liking him a ton more than I thought I would. Between his frankly ridiculous design and strange method of talking that the voice actor sometimes just forgets about.
Perhaps these gifts will be enough to get them out of this bind.
I thought he was just gonna be another zany gimmick character, and while he isn't not that, he's a cut above the rest. He's a guy who likes partaking in a crazy amount of hobbies. He picks one up for a support, and then drops it by the next one. This, paired with his interesting relations with Ivy, make him an interesting but very human character, and he ended up being one of my favorites. He's the person who wouldn't be too out of place in 3 houses. I wish there were more like him in the game. Actually, there are a few other super good characters worth mentioning. I love the Winds and the Fell Dragon siblings. With the exception of Celestia, they are some of the best written and realist characters in the game. Gregory and Madeline especially are both in contention for a single favorite in the game, and I go back and forth between them all the time. The only problem with them is that you only get them from being the Xenologue. Oh boy! I've had my fun praising the good characters in Engage, but I'm not done with the negatives yet. There are some major characters with major issues we've got to look at, and the first of those is the great Fell Dragon, Sombron. Sombron is the main antagonist of the game, and is one of the weirdest antagonists in the franchise. He's definitely modeled after Grima. Fell Dragon, Resurrecting Ceremony, familial ties to the MC, giant final boss fight, the similarities are clear. Grima's one of the most iconic villains from the series, and has a lot of good traits to make them a threatening foe, so modeling your new bad guy after them isn't the worst idea. Now, there are some things I like about Sombron. His design is definitely something unique. I think it needed a little bit more tweaking because it looks kinda silly, but in the right setting and lighting, it looks pretty good. On that note, Sombron's cinematography is actually one of the best parts of his character. Whenever he's in a fully animated cutscene, which is often, he's always cast away in dark corners away from the party, often making it difficult to fully make him out. And with his insane height, it's easy to get a high shot that makes him look like he's towering over Lear and friends, making him look more imposing. Additionally, I love his draconic form. He's got some awesome Cobra inspiration. It lets him be really flexible to lean over and gloat at the protagonists. He's also got a claw tail thing that looks really neat. And according to the DLC characters, it even works as a flashlight. Now, you've probably noticed I've been talking about his aesthetics and haven't mentioned his actual personality or motivations yet. That's because this is the point where Sombron starts seriously falling off. Sombron is one of the most boring villains in the franchise. And when he's not that, he's one of the stupidest villains in the franchise. For 90% of the game, his motivation is just evil. He wants to get back his evil homeland so he can summon an evil portal to other worlds and spread evil or whatever, dude, who cares? He's ruthless and uncaring and really boring. And when he's not that, and when his full motivation gets revealed, the dude unravels into the biggest moron ever. First off, it takes until the literal last chapter of the game to get even a sampling of Somron's motivations, so for 99% of the game, he's just some generic evil dude. Awesome presence. Anyways, in the last chapter, Somron reveals that he's not actually from Elyos. He's from a different universe and ended up in Elyos long ago with nothing but his own emblem, the Emblem of Foundations, aka Emblem 0. Unlike the other emblems, Emblem 0 encourages loneliness and isolation, which Somron embraced and learned from, until he was found and taken in by a village. As soon as he started feeling like he found a community, Emblem 0 vanished, which enraged him and sent him on a path of evil. He spent a long time wandering all over Elyos trying to find Emblem 0. And then, about 1,000 years before Engage, he figured it wasn't on Elyos anymore, and wanted to scour other worlds. He amassed an army of his children against the Divine Dragon to get the Emblem Rings to use their power to escape. He failed, he died, he came back, he tried again, he almost succeeded, and he was killed by Alir. But in his final moments, he was able to reconnect with Emblem 0. Wow. What a colossal dumbass. I can see what they were trying to go for with Somron. Alir is a hero who uses their bonds to help them win, and Somron thrives in isolation, pushing everyone away from him. But his main problem is that he only does that out of stubbornness and old ideologies. Somron easily could have won. It wouldn't have been hard. He has so much more manpower than Alir, and probably Lumera at her prime, but he's just so hell-bent on these ideals that Zero taught him that he refused to ever do anything else. The reason only 2 of Somron's children survived until the events of Engage are because he would kill them after they made a single mistake. He tried doing the same thing with Alir and Vale too, but they managed to survive. It's part of Somron's ideology that the powerful should survive on their own, but it really just means he's doing more damage to his own army and ended up losing for that. Same thing with how he treats the Hounds. He works with them, but never seems to actually cooperate or coordinate with them. He just sends them out to do stuff while he, hangs around the castle all day. I see the idea with this. He's meant to mirror Alir by being cruel and trying to rely on himself, and they could have made it work. Ashdard actually had similar ideologies to Somron. He valued power above all else, and had a group of 4 lackeys working for him in his war. But what separates the two is that Ashdard works with the 4 riders, and is open to cooperation if it helps him achieve his end goal, while Somron actively seeks to be alone, using people only for his own temporary gain, and getting rid of them once they aren't useful anymore. While it does make him appear evil, it also makes him appear really stupid. He's so focused on these ideas taught him by Emblem 0 that he never actually stops to think about what the smart move is. Solitude is strength. Why bother with anything else? So, about the one who taught Somron this stuff, Emblem 0 is incredibly strong. It's from Somron's home dimension, which is almost a good explanation of where the other emblem rings come from and why they're so sought after, but it's revealed that emblems can't travel across dimensions, except this one that can, so it just makes things even more confusing. It has other differences from standard emblems too. Other emblems benefit from bonds with people. Emblem 0 prefers solitude, to the point of leaving its wielder when they form bonds. It exists completely separately from its ring, and can go anywhere in the multiverse independent of where its ring is. Apparently, emblems can't travel through dimensions, but Emblem 0 ignores this rule that the game made up at the last minute, and also, half these guys aren't heroes. How does that work? Emblem 0 is an incredibly powerful force that, based on its title, likely predates the 12 rings and far exceeds them in power. It is the main driving force to motivate the antagonist of the game after all. If you haven't played the game yet, you've probably noticed I failed to mention one part of Emblem 0, and probably the most important part. Who is the Emblem of Foundations? All of the emblem rings contain lords of various games, and the bracelets contain more lords, or other important figures who help triumph against the evil of their time. So, who is Emblem 0? Logically, it only makes sense to be a main villain, and one with intense power. Medius, Grima, Formortes, hell, Anonkos actually has some interdimensional experiences. All would be valid choices, and would make a lot more sense than who they actually got. The Emblem of Foundations, Emblem 0, the motivator of the antagonist of the game, is nobody. It's never revealed. This is the biggest letdown and the worst story point in the entire game. You cannot set up something this big and then just not pay it off. This is the last big twist in the game, and leaves a sour taste in your mouth. We never get to know who it was who taught Somron the ways of life that led him to start 2 separate wars and take countless lives. It is an embarrassingly poor choice, and leaves Somron looking like even more of a moron since half his backstory is just missing. There are some theories as to who Emblem Zero could be. One popular theory, and the theory I subscribe to most, is that the Emblem Foundations is Kaga, the series creator. Some parts check out, mostly the long absence and leaving everything he's worked on alone to vanish mysteriously. It could also be interpreted that its arrival and sudden departure in Elios represents Insys, but it's a stretch. I mean, the whole theory is a stretch. Engage is not smart enough to get that meta, but it makes some amount of sense. The other idea is that Emblem Zero is the Somniel's guardian spirit, Somni. Somni apparently has some godly status and has been around far longer than Lumera has been alive, so some of it checks out. And it would make sense that Sombron couldn't fight him if he's been on the Somniel. Somni can eat, which is something that Emblems can't, but Emblem Zero already breaks half the rules being an emblem, so what's one more? Plus, it's funny to think that this little guy is Sombron's motivation. But the problem isn't the theories, it's that we need the theories. Not revealing Emblem Zero is the most moronic decision that brings down the world building of Engage that much further. What's the point of setting up this big character reveal who plays beyond the rules if you're not going to reveal who they are? All it does is make Sombron an even more laughable villain, which was initially what this section was about before I got sidetracked about the emblem. Sombron is a terrible villain with a non-existent motivation. He's stuck clinging to ideals that he was taught thousands of years ago, and his stubbornness and refusal to change, grow, or adapt ends up losing him 2 wars and making him look like a moron. At least his design is pretty cool. But that's only Engage's main antagonist, and like most other Fire Emblem games, there's more than just one baddie to oppose the player. Surely the henchmen will be better, right? Right? One of my favorite tropes in Fire Emblem games is the collective group of side villains working together. The Black Fang, the Six Stones, those who slid in the dark, the assassins from New Mystery. There's a few examples. Engage's rendition of this group comes in the form of the Four Hounds, a gang of individuals united to help Sombron with his nefarious deeds. They serve as recurring antagonists for the middle section of the game, and I've already talked about how bad their gameplay integration is. Unfortunately, their story rules aren't much better. For starters, let's look at each member of this crew and see what's wrong with them. From the top down, Mavier is the best of them by far, because he's the recruitable one. Mavier is one of the best written characters in the game. He's interesting on his own, with his unrelenting loyalty and determination to any cause, to the point of hurting himself for the minor safety and comfort of others. He's a lawful and serious person, who typically serves as a much needed straight man to contrast the rest of the cast. Though I wish it was a bit less obvious that he's the recruitable one. The fact that he's the only one with a personal skill is a pretty obvious giveaway to anyone paying attention. Much further down than him is Marnie. She's a young armor knight who is much less of an interesting character than Mavier. She's childish, brash, and has a zany gimmick of always looking for praise from her higher-ups. It's just as interesting as it sounds. Marnie's a really poorly handled character in how they fulfill her arc. She's this bratty little girl for 90% of her screen time, but then, once Mavier switches sides, she tags along, where she proceeds to dump her entire backstory on you out of nowhere. It has absolutely no build-up or anything. You're just on a boat, and she just decides to relay her entire life story to you for no reason. Well, that's not true. So you'll feel sad that she gets killed in the next chapter, where after you've grown attached to Marnie, Zephyr kills her by stabbing her through the chest with a dagger, which makes 0 sense because, 1, she's a general with an insane amount of armor, especially around the chest. A knife could never come close to penetrating that. 2, she has like 50 defense. I don't know, maybe Zephyr proc lethality. And third, we've beaten Marnie 5 times at this point. She's been a constant annoyance to us, and it feels really bad that she gets killed in a cutscene through none of our actions. The player should get the finishing blow on her. I like Marnie more than the other hounds for a few reasons. However forced it is, I do like her backstory. It explains a lot about how she acts, and it feels realistic enough to be relatable. More importantly though, I absolutely love her design. It's one of my favorites in the whole game, and it's probably a big part of why I love Madeline so much. Zephyr is the leader of the hounds, and ends up with the most screen time. She's a member of the Mage Dragon tribe, and is basically Sombron's right hand. If you're wondering what a Mage Dragon is, so am I. It's never explained, and they aren't mentioned by anyone else. Great! A lot of Zephyr's issues are reflective of the issues with the hounds as a whole, so I'll cover them more there, but for now, just know that she's an incredibly shallow character with extremely forced motivation and an abhorrent design. Also, I completely forgot to put this anywhere in the script. When she's dying, Zephyr switches sides and decides to give you the one thing that can defeat Sombron out of nowhere. Ignoring the stupid magical MacGuffin, her motivation for doing this is terribly explained. It makes no sense at all. It comes straight out of nowhere and completely goes against everything she's been doing for the entire game until now. In any other game, this would be the lowest point in the script. but the fact that I genuinely forgot about it until reviewing this video really goes to show how awful Engage's writing is. Last and least is Gris. Oh, Gris. Gris is, well, he's a sage? He's in the Hounds? He's green? Gris isn't anybody, that's his issue. Every member of the Hounds gets their backstory and reason for joining at some point. Mavier is Vale's protector. He's in the Hounds to keep an eye on her. Marnie is young and looking for a family she was never able to have. Zephyia is a loyal follower of Sombron and also wanted a family more than anything else. Gris is just kinda here. He gets a bit of backstory explained, but it's only through Gregory. He's in the Hounds because he likes Zephyia, but what are Gris's goals? What does he want? Who is Gris? We never know, because the game never bothers to explain it past the surface level. He likes pain. That's it. The biggest issue with the Hounds collectively is that they're just really generic. It's the most standard group of anime villains you could concoct. They simply aren't unique enough to be interesting. There's a video that Mangs made that pokes fun at all these characters. Take a look.
I'm the big titty dragon mommy. I'm the slightly weird and creepy general who speaks in innuendos. I had a tragic childhood, but no matter how much you try, you can never fix me.
I'm recruitable.
Pretty funny stuff, yeah, it is. Especially considering it came out 2 months before the game did. The fact that he was able to perfectly predict these four based solely on their designs and mannerisms really says more than anything I could. Overall, not the worst group Fire Emblems ever conjured up. But with villainous gangs, the sum of the parts is only a part of the picture. What really makes them memorable is how they interact with each other. Who are they as a group? A tight-knit found family? A group who just happened to end up with each other and chose to stick? The dynamic of the group is what makes these gangs so enjoyable. And do the Hounds have a good dynamic? No. The Hounds, especially Zephyia, always insist that they are a family. They care for and love each other. But the thing is, they don't. At no point does it begin to look like they do. The Hounds are constantly disagreeing with each other, betraying each other, and very rarely seem like they're working together out of anything other than obligation. When they're in a conversation with one another, most times it's just about their work, and when it's not, they're just arguing with each other. The only time they ever seem to actually work together is when they share a map as bosses. Zephyia even verbally and physically abuses the other members, especially Marnie when they screw up. This all culminates with Mavier and Marnie eventually leaving the group after seeing how the other two treat Vale, which leads to Zephyia killing Marnie. Like a real family. Like Sombron, I see what they were trying to go for with the Hounds. They're supposed to be a dysfunctional found family that stick with each other because they don't have anyone else. It makes sense that Zephyia treats him so cruelly, because the only person she's had to learn from is Sombron, who punishes or kills his children after one mistake. It's a great idea for a tragic group of antagonists, but there are more than a few issues holding back the idea. The Hounds never act like a family, so we never get to see the connection between them. Zephyia and Marnie are the only ones that really want to stick together for the family part. Mavier is there because of unrelated factors, and Gris kinda likes Zephyia, but he also pulls that out of his ass as he's dying, so I'm thinking the writers genuinely forgot to give him motivation to stick around until then, because he never actually demonstrates any reason why he hangs around these guys. More importantly, if you want to make a tragic group of side villains for the player to feel sympathetic for, these aren't the right villains. They're way too cartoony or boring to really feel bad for, especially with this tier of writing. The Black Fang is a similar group to what the Hounds want to be. They're a found family of miscreants who get caught up in something larger and more sinister than any of them are ready for, and you get to watch as the family gets torn apart throughout the course of the game. No member of the family is a witty, wisecracking gimmick character. The closest you get is Jafar, whose wacky and crazy gimmick is that the only thing he knows how to do is kill people. But the real differentiator between the two gangs is that the Black Fang gets scenes where you get to see them interact like an actual, well-established group that cares for each other. We get to see their connections and watch them get torn apart. It's heartbreaking, it's fantastic storytelling, and it's not what the Hounds have. But the real kicker is that the engaged writers have the capacity to write a group like this, and they did! The 4 wins! These guys are some of the last living people in the world, and stick with each other because they have nobody else and work as a team to protect the dragons. But the thing is, they feel like an actual family. They get scenes with each other where they just talk to each other about life, the universe, and everything. They make some fun of each other, but it's a lighthearted tease rather than verbal abuse. They all look out for each other, know each other, and get along well as a group. Part of that is the addition of supports, sure, but considering how much screen time the Hounds get, it's not much of an advantage. The Winds are some of the best written characters in the game, and are a fantastic group together because they feel like an actual family. The Hounds are a misguided and poorly handled attempt to have a memorable collection of villains, but completely fall apart at the seams. They have no chemistry with each other, they constantly betray and belittle one another, and they repeatedly tell the audience that they're a family while showing absolutely nothing to support the claim. Maybe they could have worked in a different game with better writing. The only thing they seem to want together is to defeat the Divine Dragon. And speaking of, there's one more character I need to talk about, and I've saved the best for last. It's finally time to look at... Alear is the main character and Lord of Engage. They are a divine dragon who awakens from a 1,000-year-long slumber to defeat the fell dragon and bring peace to the world. I like to look on the positive side, so I'll start by talking about the things I like about Alear's character. Well, that was fun. Let's get into why they suck. Alear is easily the worst protagonist the franchise has ever seen, surpassing even the likes of Corrin. There are a few reasons for this, and one of the most important ones that is harder to notice is their growth throughout the game. To be more exact, Alear's hero's journey. You know, the classic arc that any good protagonist goes through during the course of their adventure. Their rise to the top through struggles and setbacks to forge them into a better person. Alear doesn't have that. They barely grow during the story. The first and most apparent issue with their journey is that they start on top of the world already. They are literally the god of Elyos. People worship them. There is no further place to go from there. Yeah, they go on wacky misadventures with the emblems to restore peace to the world, but where they end up? Exact same place they started, a deity. What's the point of the character going on this epic adventure if they just end up right back where they started? It makes the whole quest feel repetitive and unnecessary. But hey, there is more to a hero's journey than just their power, and that's all the growth they have as a person. And don't worry, Alear is equally as bad at that. Alear almost has an arc through the game. The devs seem to want to give Alear something, and then just forget to. Alear's main issue is that they're too trusting. They see the good in people, and immediately assume they're willing to help them. This could be a side effect of most everyone treating them like a god, but I think it's actually just a coincidence. This culminates with Alear trusting the wrong person, results in them getting betrayed and losing every single emblem ring they've gotten up to that point, which puts their entire team in a really bad spot. This would be the perfect time for some character development. Alear learns that the world isn't all good, and it's filled with evil people who will betray them for their own gains. That'd be an interesting approach for a sheltered main character, and is the perfect setup for solid growth in the back half of the game. In the chapter after Alear gets betrayed, they're lost in the desert with nothing around for miles. Suddenly, and out of nowhere, 3 mysterious individuals appear and say they can help lead the Lost Dragon to Solm Palace. Now, given how shady the situation is, and what just happened to our poor protagonist, what do you think they do? That's right, they blindly follow the 3 of them. And guess what? Everything turns out okay. And unfortunately, Alear doesn't get any chance to actually grow like this again. They remain about the same throughout the rest of the journey. Even after learning that they're the offspring of the force they've been fighting against the whole game, they get sad for a bit, then just bounce right back to no actual development. Well, there is one major point of growth for Alear, and there's a reason I've been dancing around it. Near the end of the game, Alear sacrifices themselves to save Vale. There's still a few chapters left, and we know the game isn't going to leave its protagonist dead. But Alear actually gets brought back to life in a super interesting way. Vale revives him as a corrupted, which gives them just enough strength to gather the emblems before losing their life once more. It's actually pretty cool. It's combining a few ideas the game had presented us with earlier, and it's a really smart play from Vale. Plus, it's the perfect setup for a fantastic finale. Alear gathers the emblems one final time, and then dies for a great cause, leading Vale, the other child of Sombron, to finally end their father's reign of terror. That would be a sick ending. However, that is not what happens. Instead, the Emblem rings channel their super secret power that was really badly foreshadowed earlier, that they can only use once ever apparently, and revive Alear, but as an emblem this time. But what emblem? Every emblem has a title. The Emblem of Beginnings, Emblem of Strength, Emblem of Dawn. It's part of the process. What's Alear's title? Well, they're not just any emblem.
Emblem. The Fire Emblem.
I'm the 13th emblem. The Fire Emblem?
This is the single worst line I have ever read. I want to get it printed, framed, and put on a wall. It's beyond cheesy. It's beyond silly. It breaks any immersion, and somehow it gets immediately followed up by Sigurd saying Among Us. This is the single most engaged moment in Engage. It's poorly foreshadowed, horrendously written, unbelievably corny, and absolutely hilarious. And somehow, Alir still barely grows from this. They act the exact same way throughout the entire story, and still because of their terrible starting position. If Alir was anybody else, the rise to becoming an emblem would make them a godlike being, since that's what the emblems are. They would be revered, worshipped, and hold immense power for the world. The problem is, Alir already starts in that exact spot. Alir can't get any further up from the start, so they end up not moving anywhere, which results in them having no character arc for the entire game, and being a boring main character to follow, and a complete failure as the Lord. But whatever, they may be a boring main character, but how are they as a regular character? Who is the Alir we see in supports? Well, they're still boring, but in a different way. Alir, unfortunately, doesn't have enough personality to act as a compelling main character. They're nice, and that's about their only actual character trait. They treat people kindly and are humble about their status. These are traits that almost every single lord before them has had, but even the dullest of them have something on top of that. This is the standard for lords. It's the base blueprint, the foundation, but it's not a completed character. Alir's supports show this as well. Most of them involve some characters showing off their zany, singular personality trait, while Alir asks what they're doing and acts weirded out, but they rarely ever actually contribute to the conversation. It's a lot like the Byleth supports in Three Houses, where it's mostly just an opportunity for the side character to give the audience a proper introduction with little interference. The thing is, that was a good formula in Three Houses because Byleth was a silent protagonist. It makes sense with the structure of the game. While Alir isn't silent in their supports, with how little they contribute, they may as well be. I don't remember a single Alir support because of what Alir does in them, because most of the time, that's nothing. There's one last thing that really makes Alir insufferable, and that's an aspect of the series that people have been complaining about since New Mystery: Avatar worship. The trend of the self-insert characters getting more love and praise because they're the main character. I personally think that people overblow how prevalent it is. Korn and Chris really suffer for it, but they're terrible characters to begin with, and Robin and Byleth don't have nearly as big a case of it as people say. Alir, on the other hand, oh boy, I get it. They're a deity, they're worshipped, they're a big deal, but good God, it would be awesome if people could stop licking their boots for like half a second. Whenever Alir support isn't about the quirky cast, it's about someone talking about how cool and awesome the Divine Dragon is. In this story, people will just join up with them because they're the Divine Dragon, the greatest and mightiest being to ever grace our presence. There are not one but two characters whose entire personality is just simping over Alir. If you thought Cyril was annoying, imagine two of him, but without the interesting backstory. The constant praise of Alir and holding them up on a pedestal is insufferable, dude. It completely dehumanizes them and makes them nearly impossible to relate to, as if their complete lack of personality didn't already do that. It really is the final nail in the coffin in ruining the story, and Alir as a character. Before making this video, I had another idea of an analysis of Shez, and why they're the worst lord in Fire Emblem history. As I started thinking more about this video, I ended up scrapping the idea, because they aren't anymore. However bad Shez is, Alir is infinitely more deserving of the title of worst Fire Emblem lord. Even the least interesting of the lords before them have so much more going on than Alir. They're a non-character who stands around while everything happens around them. They don't grow throughout the story, they don't have anything interesting to do or say throughout the course of the game, they end up at the exact same spot they started their adventure in, and they constantly get praised for just existing without earning it. It's hard to root for Alir and harder to relate to them. They don't have any connectable traits to begin with, but then everyone constantly worships them and puts them up on a golden pedestal, and it just completely alienates them. Let's wrap this up by going back to my trusty chart. Engage has one of the weakest casts in the series. I'd say it's better than Arcanea, but that's about it. A vast majority of the characters are too crazy and whimsical, and the main character is so dull that they end up on the complete other side. Engage has some good characters. It has some great characters, but as a whole, the roster suffers from the same running issues that plague the rest of the game. Echoes and Three Houses were tough casts to follow, maybe impossible, but surely they could have done better than this. And that's just about everything I can talk about with this game. I know it took a long while. There's a lot that I feel needs to be discussed in Engage, good and bad. And all of it leads up to our $1 million question. should you play Fire Emblem Engage? To answer that question, I'll respond with my own question. How much are you willing to tolerate bad story for good gameplay? Whatever your response is, amplify it tenfold. If it's still positive, you've gotta play it. If it's at all negative, avoid it like the plague. I've said this before, but Engage is a mixing pot of every game in the series. It takes some of their best and worst ideas and combines them into its own thing. But the games is pulling from all very different visions and priorities, so they don't quite jive together perfectly, resulting in the hodgepodge game we ended up with. Engage is easily one of my favorite games in the series, because it's most of the things I love about the series at their best. The gameplay is phenomenal. It rewards strategic decision making, and discourages the heavy turtling that defeats all challenge of awakening. It's a game that gives you a ton of freedom to mess around, and lets you get away with silly builds on the highest difficulty while still posing a challenge. The Emblem rings are wildly fun to use, and are a mechanic I would love to see brought back in some form in a later game. They have so much depth to the gameplay and so many options that it feels like it should be unfair, but the game knows how to counter its own tricks. In terms of gameplay alone, this is the best Fire Emblem has ever been. But while Fire Emblem is more than just gameplay, Engage isn't. Engage's story is easily the worst the series has ever seen, and is genuinely one of the most poorly written, officially published works I've ever seen. If you come to Engage expecting a thrilling plot, you will be sorely disappointed, which is why I can't recommend it to everyone, nor call it my favorite. Fire Emblem games are supposed to have great stories. It's why some of these games are as beloved as they are. Can I excuse Engage's story? No. Can I look around it and appreciate what it does offer? Yes. Engage is a weird game to recommend and a hard game to rank. With everything it offers, it manages to clock it as my second favorite, right behind Radiant Dawn. The game that not only manages to have fantastic gameplay and story, but integrate the two of them brilliantly. Engage offers better gameplay than Radiant Dawn, but at a great cost. I love it dearly for what it does great, but also hate it for everything it does wrong. I had a whole section here that I was going to close out with, discussing what I was hoping future games could learn from Engage, but something unexpected happened. On the day I was going to record it, a Nintendo Direct dropped that announced the next entry in the series, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. See, sometimes taking half an eon to make videos can come in handy. Jokes aside, Fortune's Weave seems like a great next step, and is a game I'm super hyped for. But it's really interesting to look at the design choices it made. Fortune's Weave is clearly meant to be a sequel, successor, or follow-up to Three Houses of some kind. Ignoring the obvious sign of adult Sothis, we've seen several mechanics from Three Houses in the trailer, and the art direction is very similar. They actually remember what color theory is when making characters. I think this is the right step for the series, and I'm glad to see it return to a darker style, but I'm also kinda disappointed by the lack of influence from Engage. Honestly, it feels like these games should have been swapped with each other. Follow up Three Houses with Fortune's Weave, and later, right as the series is celebrating its 35th anniversary, announce Engage, this more lighthearted game that gathers the lores we know and love from all the past games. It's perplexing that they didn't do this, and now we have the Three Houses duology with this weird middle child sandwich in between the two, with them likely just pretending it doesn't exist. Engage may not have been as popular as Three Houses critically or commercially, and it definitely has its fair share of issues, but it would be a shame to ignore everything good the game has just for that. Engage has a lot of great mechanics they want to see return in future games. Even if they don't plan on bringing back big mechanics like Emblem Rings or Chi Adept, I'm hoping they at least keep class types and chain attack. They're legitimately some of my favorite parts of the gameplay that naturally slot in with everything else. More than anything, I don't want Engage to be forgotten. Completely ignoring it to make a sequel to Three Houses isn't a bad move, but after that, who knows what's gonna happen. When the next brand new Fire Emblem comes around, are they gonna take some of the elements of Engage to make it amazing, or just sweep it under the rug because it got a bad reputation? I'm hoping it has some influence on the future of the series. It's clearly a game that had a lot of thought, effort, and more importantly, heart put into it. There's so many weird little details in Engage that only exist because the developers really cared about this game. The weird naming conventions, the after-battle conversations, the new arena, the two versions of each map, and my absolute favorite detail, Engage lines. Whenever an Engaged character defeats an opponent or uses their attack, they'll say a special line, usually a quote from the original character.
Our bonds are far stronger than destiny.
The cool part is, every single character has lines for every single emblem, no matter how outlandish the combination is.
If this means survival.
It's further supported by the emblems having bond conversations, their equivalent to supports, with every character in the roster. Yeah, they're only 1 or 2 lines apiece, but that's a unique 1 or 2 lines per support per character. It's a wonderful detail that further enhances the creativity Engage strides itself on, and just further encourages you to make weird, out there builds. It's nice to know that on my next playthrough, my Citrune's gonna have unique lines for whenever I kill an enemy when she's engaged with Hector that no normal person has ever heard. Engage is a game that has so much love put into it. It can be argued whether that love was put into the right places, but it's a game that so many developers and designers cared about, and it's a game that so many creative players, like myself, love dearly. I absolutely treasure this game, dude. There's a reason I just talked about it for 2 hours. It's easily my favorite Fire Emblem to just sit down, strategize about, and play. But as much as I love that part of it, I can't just ignore the many weird decisions and design choices that weigh down substantially and earn it the one title it truly deserves. Engage is the worst, best Fire Emblem game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.